Here we go, the first one.
Hello, my name is Dr. Carrie Kazel. I'm an associate professor in the biology department at the State University in our department for 18 years. So it was my 18th year teaching it in the remote mode this past fall 2020. My research area is in bat sonar and communication, and certainly I brought that into my course and have been doing that. All right, so I wanted to just share what remote mode means for our campus. It's the use of a learning management system. Ours is Moodle. We call it On Course on Campus. But it's also synchronous. And so I know this differs, this definition of what's going on. So for us in a remote mode, we have synchronous lecture and discussion, which means the students are required to attend live during their class days and time. And for my class, that was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And we met at our class time. And we did that using the Zoom meeting platform. I just want to mention here a couple of things I provided students to be successful in the remote or an online learning mode. I give them, it's actually a slideshow like this for tips for success in remote learning. And then I post that on OnCourse. And then I also create this how-to book. You can see the table of contents. So it's just a way that they can gain access to answers on how to do these things if they're not familiar with some of them. Because again, moving to the remote mode past spring and in the fall was, new for students to be working so much online. And then finally, weekly overviews I think are very important. They list the topic for the week, and then they also included the things to do for that week for the student and any due dates of assignments or assessments. Okay, so for my lecturing, again, it was live, and I used PowerPoint, and these were recorded. And actually, they were provided only to students who had a legitimate excuse to not have been there during the live session. So they were then, again, the lecture material I provided with PowerPoint slides, and I could annotate. I joined the session with an iPad so I could use a stylus to write well in over top of the PowerPoint as I would be writing on the board, for example, or I would go to the whiteboard mode in Zoom or pull up a Google Doc to type. Students could also contribute with annotation. I did that in PowerPoint with a blank slide with the title of Costs and Benefits of Group Living, for example. And students contributed what they thought were costs and benefits by typing in. That worked out really well. We used breakout rooms in Zoom to have small group discussions and then come back together. The thing with that was just that it took longer than I expected just to move into the small groups and then back out and make sure they had the proper instruction going in, saved time, so I didn't have to enter each room and give them the instruction. So that was a learning experience for me. Discussion boards I used, I had them watch Dr. Hoekstra's Genetics of Behavior video available online. They had questions they needed to answer in a written assignment. They chose a question to answer on the discussion board, and in a second post, they had to say whether they agreed or not with a student's classmate's post, and then provide new information in order to get the full points for the postings. They needed to also give the resource if it was a new example or some research they were bringing to the second post. In terms of field or lab activities, there is not a separate component like that for this course. However, I would say, in my in-person versions of the course, they would do actual research. I call it a pilot experiment. So they would actually carry out an experiment. I turned that into a research proposal for the fall 2020 course. And so they were to do that. That was a semester-long project. They could work in groups of 2 for that. And then there's an ethogram and fixed action pattern assignment where they could, if they had access, be out in the field to observe and come up with their ethogram, and then choose one of those behaviors they described as a potential fixed action pattern. Digital resources, I made the text optional in the fall because of perhaps economic issues for students. I've used the Alcock and Rubenstein e-text in the past, and I just offer that as the e-text. You can see articles I've included in the course here and videos. And I would play these during, however, some of them said they didn't come through. So sometimes I would just provide the link in the chat and they could click on that and watch it outside of the Zoom meet. And then I also provide website links on the on-course site, such as a lab website that covers electroreception in sharks. One of the topics. That's one of the topics we cover in the class. All right, and finally for student assessments, just to wrap up, assignments, I've mentioned the ethogram and fixed action pattern one. I also do a feeding behavior assignment. They read a section on optimal foraging behavior. They then watch videos on spider web building and kingfisher fishing to obtain food and answer questions. The proposal that they do, the research proposal, is provided then to the rest of the class as an oral presentation live during our class session. I mentioned the discussion board. So going back to the research article paper, it's a written assignment. They choose an animal behavior peer-reviewed primary literature article that they then, in the last 5 years, go through, summarize, but then include how it connects to course topics and a critique. And then finally, we had certainly a push that was suggested by our online training crew on our campus to decrease the stakes of any particular assessment. The idea here is perhaps that we cut down on potential cheating as one of the reasons to do this. But what I ended up doing then was having more assessments. I normally would have, I think it was 3 exams and a final. And I switched this to 4 knowledge checks and a final. I called them something else. I call them knowledge checks. They're basically quizzes throughout the semester on less material. They were shorter than number of questions, and they were provided through the quiz feature online on OnCourse. They were a combination of figure interpretation, multiple choice, true, false, short answer, matching. All of these things were options. There was even a drag and drop question to label a figure. All those are options in the OnCourse system with the quiz. All right, so I look forward to our workshop coming up, and I hope you've thought of a few questions or had some information that was useful to you from my presentation. Thanks. All right, bye.
Well, thank you, Carrie. And Carrie's here, so she'll be in one of the breakout rooms and we can talk to her later. And when we have one last one coming up by Elaine. Let me see if I can get it. Here we go.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to talk about my experience on teaching ethology online. I'm Eliane Gonçalves de Freitas from University of São Paulo State in Brazil. This discipline is part of the undergraduate course in biological sciences. It lasts 60 hours. I have around 30 students each class, and I've been using Google Classroom and Google Meet for teaching. The strategy of the discipline is that students can learn by observing behavior, asking and answering questions, and identifying solving problems by means of scientific projects. Observing behavior and asking questions means that classes start with short videos available on the internet or from my personal collection. They are followed by discussions and questions, and then I provide a slideshow with concepts and definition to organize the ideas previously discussed. For instance, I use some videos like this of capuchin monkeys using tools, or those wonderful videos that are available on the internet about paradise birds, or even about the mannequins. This is a video from the Cornell University. So after this and the discussion, after this type of class, I post some activities in Google Classroom in which students must answer questions regarding the subject of the class. For example, they can answer, how can we explain the selection of elaborated ornaments? Then they will recover the knowledge from the previous classes, and they can also move forward for example, how environmental pollution can affect animal communication. This type of classes, it lasts around 2/3 of the discipline, and the last third of the discipline, students have to use those that theoretical approach, and then identify problems, elaborate hypotheses, and develop a scientific project. During this phase, I give them a background about description and quantification of behavior, that's using practical classes, and discussions about how to make a scientific plan. For quantification and description of behavior, I use videos of secret behavior from my personal collection, such as aggressive behavior of Naya tilapia. Secrets are a very good model for this type of classes. So they receive the video, they describe, they quantify, then I compare it among the students, the results or what they did, and correct things, and I also can talk about accuracy and confiability in measure behavior. In the end of this phase, students have to provide a plan, a text in PDF, based on the ABS application form. They also have to present the project. They have 30 minutes. The beginning of this period, they present the project, and then they discuss with the audience, with the other students in the class. And to incentivize this type of discussion, every student can access the text of all projects before presentation to facilitate this kind of interaction. So they can be more critical about the animal behavior science than act as observer only. In the end, the students are evaluated by the tasks, those tasks answering questions. They are around 6 or 7 tasks, and by the scientific project. All activities are made in groups. I incentivize them to work in groups. And so the grade depends on the students' interaction. The better the interaction, the higher the probability of a good grade. And this style of discipline is the same style I use in in-person classes, but I could adjust this style in this online discipline. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, very good. I think Eduardo's now going to sign us to breakout rooms.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank all the video presenters. If you're here, Well done. They're very engaging and they're very nicely timed to go with the talks that we provided. And those that are missing, hopefully they'll get to hear the thank yous on our behalf on video, on recordings.
So real quick before you go to breakout rooms, there was several questions about evaluations, and I use CAPME, so our teamwork. This does, it's not free though. It used to be, and it's no longer free. Enough people at my institution were using it anyway. So my campus or university just ended up paying for a license for it. But it's really great in that it will actually put students in teams for you. It creates the survey. You can add questions as you want. And it'll put students in teams for you. And I just kind of adjust them as needed. And then it has other things too, where they can actually practice rating fake team members before they actually go in and rate their actual team members. So they do that at the same time they make the surveys. And then these are kind of the questions that they get. And it's not actually on like a 1 through 5 Likert scale, even though that's the data that I get. But they are actually looking at these specific things instead of having to just say good, very good, bad. So that's what I use. You can kind of see some of the examples in here to see how it looks. And then this is the kind of data that I get from it. But unfortunately, it does cost money to use. So I just wanted to point that out. For the questions then to consider, I'll put these in the chat right now. And yeah, so we are ready to go into teams. All right, so I think we're all about here. So what I was hoping that we could do, if you have any like 1 or 2 compelling things, if you could type that in the chat, just because sometimes it's hard to get to everybody. And I know people are starting to get tired now. So if the reporter could type that in, and then in the meantime, if anyone would like to talk a little bit further about some of the things that they learned about or talked about, then you can just raise your hand.
I'd like to make just a few comments. So I talked about my laboratory part of my field course, but I have other things. And one of the things we talked about in our group is a diversity of assessment tools, Andrea, because there are different style learners. And so some are great and nimble in the field and others are scared of spiders, right? And so they're just not going to be as good in the field. And so I have 2 other things that I do in my behavior class. One, all the readings are primary readings, and there's usually about 3 or 4 per topic. I assign 2 people in the class to be leaders of discussion. And it was Doug who talked about the difference between presentation and discussion this morning. And their job was to just move us along, get us excited, and challenge us. And they got scored on that, okay, on how well they provoked us to talk. And the second is, there's a lot of wonderful charismatic mammals out there in Africa, and everybody had to choose one. And they had to give a presentation on it. But I did not want a boring field guide presentation. I said, what's going to stimulate us is how you can provoke us to argue with you. So we need you to identify 3 features of this animal that surprised you, caught you off guard, that makes this animal so unique that we're all going to want to see it. And we're all going to want to watch it. And those are the 2 extra things that I added in addition to the lab, so that we had different, and then I had a final exam as well. And that had 1 question basically of their own making. So again, different styles of learning and presentation for the different types of kids.
Yeah, I like that. So for my class, the final project, like I said, is an infographic, but then the capstones they have.
I love that. I saw it. I mean, I went online. They're beautiful. That's a great idea. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, and then so the capstone assignments, they could do an essay, a PowerPoint, a recorded presentation, or an infographic. And I told them up front, eventually you are going to be required to create an infographic. So you can do that now, or you can wait. I also had a couple discussion boards. I've been trying to vary what we do in the discussion board. And I have some discussion boards where they actually do like a comic strip, or I have a couple where they make a little infographic and they can either handwrite it or they can work on those programs that they're eventually going to have to use. And so that way they have the option if they don't want to make an infographic over and over and over again.
But what I like about the infographics is that you can bind it in a way and make it a course archive for the next year's class, or for the department head, or for the teaching and learning center. So because they're visual, they're compelling, they're engaging. So I really like that idea rather than a boring series of reports.
Yeah, definitely. So I see Nancy has her hand up.
Yes, little plug here, but something that might be useful. So this past semester, I participated in a series called FINE, Frontiers in Social Evolution. There were 3 organizers. They had people from all over the world giving seminars on totally different aspects of social evolution. So there was a diverse representation to some extent of organisms and scientists. And so a few of us, starting next week, are getting together in a workshop to try to figure out how to use these seminars in animal behavior classes. So they're on YouTube. So it's like a 50, 60-minute seminar, and then there's like an hour Q&A, which I'll probably skip for my students, tell them they don't have to watch it. But then some kind of incentive to get the students to watch these. And at least one of the organizers, I think, will come meet with my students virtually. You know, maybe some of the other presenters will come meet with the students virtually. And so the students could get to ask questions. And then this series is going to pick up again in March, I think. And again, I think it'll go March to June. So there'll be another, again, diverse group of people. And it's a cool way to get to hear about research from people you'd never be able to invite to your university or college because it would cost too much.
Especially in your time to host them. I do that in my agriculture class. I have some of the primary readings, and I have a town hall section to my agriculture class, which is a 3-hour class. A half hour, we Skype in or Zoom in one of the researchers, and the students then have a town hall between me, the researcher, and them, and it works out really well.
Oh, that's good to know.
So you're going to be doing that with these stars. It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, and the other thing is on the emails the week before the seminars, they suggested readings. So the person giving the seminar would suggest some things. So we might be able to take advantage of that too. Have the students read something. It'll help them formulate some questions that'll be related to the seminar. But we're going to, when I went to these, I made some notes, a little biased maybe by my personal interest, but about which ones I thought would be good for the class.
Yep.
And, you know, I mean, when do students not want to learn about spotted hyenas and stuff like that? Weird, you know, charismatic or strange animals.
I'm just reading the chat. There's some cool stuff going on in there as well. There was something that was brought up that I just wanted to mention too, that someone brought up thinking about the cost for students. So how much all these different things actually cost for students to get. The more stuff we add, unless it's free stuff, it's raising that cost up even more for them. And so one thing I want to point out is that there are, as far as like textbook material, there are a lot of open education resources that are available. So this means that it's freely available to use. Anyone can just grab stuff and put it directly in their class and use it. And that list that I sent out earlier, a lot of the resources that I posted on there are actually open education resources that are available to use and that have a Creative Commons license too. So you don't have to worry about if you post it on your online learning management system, is there some copyright violation? You don't have to worry about that with Creative Commons license things. So I recommend checking out some of that stuff and see if you can incorporate that, or like the videos that we were just hearing about, incorporating videos into your classroom, stuff that is freely available and taking advantage of everything that is available online. Because as we are making our own classes, we're also finding how many different things are actually available online, which is really cool. So I know it gets a little bit harder as you go into more specialized classes, such as animal behavior, but there are still a lot of stuff. So I recommend checking that out. Was there anyone else that wanted to talk about any specifics? There's some really good ideas out here. Okay, so we have someone raise their hand. I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrong.
Sugata, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Basically, in our discussion, we were discussing a few topics. One of them was I found very interesting was like one person was saying that that concept constructive feedback, like in one assessment, students get feedback from their teacher, and then in the second assignment, it was about to their response about this feedback, how well they understand this feedback. So this is a very good way to understand student as well as whether student got the feedback right or not. And another point which was discussed in that our group discussion was like some people gives points or credits to the students who interact more, but it have a problem such as the few students are very few students are extrovert. They can raise that question, and but there are few students who are not good at speaking. Is that justified for those students? So these are the main two questions raised in our group. So that's
good. Thank you.
Andrea, if I may.
Yeah, please.
We had a good experience a while ago. It was not a lockdown year or a weird year, but we had a nice experience with backyard natural history documentaries. So people would go from insects to butterflies or anything they had around their houses, and we had a look at a few nice natural history videos as examples, and they had to go out and film their own natural history videos with a cell phone camera or something, and it was done in groups, so I kind of diluted the quality of the equipment the students had, and I have to edit the video, put the music background and stuff, and we got really funny stuff with like very adventurous movies of Black Fly or something like that. But the students were really creative about that too.
Did the students have to narrate, Eduardo?
Yeah, they had to find out what behaviors were going on and explain everything in a compelling way.
I like that idea.
It's good. Yeah.
So we are at 3:00 now. At this point, I'd like to kind of just have this be our soft close. So meaning that if you are already overwhelmed with stuff, we won't take any offense if you end up leaving now. But if you would like to stay and talk a little bit more about what you've learned from this past semester and what you're hoping to do moving forward, even thinking when we are back face to face, that would be great, because I think we could have a really productive conversation. But we won't take it personally if you do actually leave right now. So I'll just give you guys a moment to think about that.
And I'd like
a silly analogy
for joining.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'd like to thank everybody for joining in and being so proactive and sharing. The number of suggestions and readings and links and everything has been absolutely phenomenal. And as I think I and the three other organizers are just delighted with everything you've added. Thank you.
Yeah, Dan and I were about to say the same thing at the same time there. The only thing I would add is this silly analogy. You know, when my family goes on a vacation, we always pick one thing to do each day, and maybe two if we're lucky. And you know, with all this smorgasbord of things that we've heard about today, you know, just pick a couple, right, and see if you can kind of insert those into your classes, and that'll go and maybe carry on to subsequent quarters. But I'm really excited about all these resources. I have about 50, 60 tabs open in Chrome now that I'm gonna bookmark at the end of this. So thank you very much for your participation.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same. Thank you for your participation and for your time the whole day today. But we still expect some of you to remain with us and chat a little more about your ideas and expectations.
So I see Christine, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Some people, including me, I forgot about this and I remembered immediately afterward. If you logged out, then it deleted half the chat. Like if you logged out for lunch, you can't see anything. So I was just going to check if someone's going to save a complete log of the chat and put it somewhere.
Yes, we are planning on doing that. So we will save the chat. We will have the video, recorded video as well. So if you miss some of the sessions, you can still watch that. And we will be making all that available. And I know a lot of people have been asking about some of the resources that all of us have been using in our classes. So we'll be making those things available mostly through that list, but we will let you know. So we'll give you a nice summary of all of that stuff.
Great.
Laura, have your hand up?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have like a plan for right now, or can I throw out some idea for that I have?
It's open now.
It's open. Okay. Yeah.
That's the plan.
I just wanted to say things. I don't know how other people are feeling. I've been teaching for 11 years at the college I'm at and more before that, but I'm feeling completely overwhelmed. Like this was really wonderful, but you know, just today I have 100 new ideas, and that's after a week of my college doing the same thing with workshops and stuff. And yeah, it's a lot. But so anyway, but plus on top of that, we have a pandemic. We're teaching remotely. People are dying. We have complete social upheaval here in the United States and other parts of the world as well, that we and our students are being impacted by. And so I just decided I'm going to do a very slow start to the semester and like really acknowledge and look at those things that are going on. And my sister actually had a great idea for how to start the semester, because I said this in one of the breakout groups, my first day is inauguration day. And it always seems odd to me teaching during historical events like that are happening. Like we used to not recognize Martin Luther King Day at my college. And so I would just play his speeches when I taught instead. Like we were supposed to be teaching that day and we talk about public communication. But yeah, teaching during the inauguration feels a little weird given what's going on in our country right now. And so my sister suggested teaching about how are we going to rebuild trust in science in our country? And I was like, that is a brilliant idea. And so I was just thinking of like starting with some introductions and then talking about that. And then I posted in the chat that I think before I dive into any of the science of animal behavior, I really wanted to talk about how there's subjectivity in animal behavior that we need to acknowledge and, you know, like reckon it with, that most of animal behavior has been shaped by a certain identity group of folks, and that's changing now, which is wonderful. But why does that matter? And how does our individual life experience shape us as scientists, whether we become scientists, the questions we ask, how we interpret our observations? Like it's not cut and dry. And so I was planning to start off with a module that was much more subjective than I've ever done before. So just wanted to throw that out there.
So there's a really, if you're looking for resources on more of like what is science and a little bit more of the history of it, I just posted a link to Berkeley's Nature of Science website.
Thank you.
I use a lot of the content on there. It gets into a lot of the stuff that like science isn't just purely objective. Like you mentioned, like who are the scientists? Like where is information coming from? We all have our own unique backgrounds and we are people. So it gets into a lot of really cool stuff, and they have probably overwhelming amount of lesson plans and stuff that are in there as well. So I recommend it.
Let me comment on that as well. I mean, one of the things about animal behavior is it's about evidence. And because it is the least hard of all the hard sciences, how you gather data, how you interpret data, evidence is a perfect segue to deal with your question of impact and trust. But there's another side that's come from our undergraduates, at least at Princeton, and I am now the departmental representative for diversity and inclusion. They wanted to know the roots of EEB. And I have a whole reading list now and stuff. Konrad Lorenz for animal behavior, he was an avowed Nazi, and you have to deal with that. And then you've got real serious issues of field stations and colonialism and racism. These are serious issues that can be part of the foundation of where our ideas come from and which ideas stick, which ones were ignored, which people didn't get credit for the ideas that they had because they were not mainstream white Nordic Europeans. And putting things in context brings the whole class together, because there are a lot of minorities, there are a lot of students with different backgrounds, and their parents came from different parts of the world. And bringing that in humanizes the teaching of animal behavior.
And it looks like we have some more resources coming up in the chat as well to check out. So definitely, and that's one thing I like about that website as well, is it gets into, it's subjective. And so why then do we care? And ultimately it's getting at, well, it's still based on evidence. It's just who's collecting that evidence and who's interpreting that evidence might be a little bit different. So we need to look at that, but it's still based on evidence. And it gets into more about that, which is nice.
And Turner, Nancy Solomon raises Turner, who is very underappreciated early in the 20th century. Fortunately, we have fellowships, the Turner Fellowships, to bring underrepresented minorities to the Animal Behavior Society meetings. So, definitely bring his accomplishments into your teaching. You'll be amazed at how he predates some of our Nobel laureates.
And I just posted one link, but there might be better links because I've never heard of him except for our award until Daniel
Science
Lee.
did a big thing. Science had a big piece on Turner about a month ago.
Right. And they didn't mention Lee's article from 2020.
Yeah.
So there was some controversy about that.
I'm glad to hear you all talking about this. I hosted the Animal Behavior Society meeting at Morehouse College in 2000. And before the keynote, the opening speaker spoke, I got up and said, well, since this is my house, I mean, that's what we call Morehouse,
right.
My house. How many of you know of Charles Turner? And it was embarrassing because the audience had about 700 animal behaviorists from all over the world, and only 6 knew about Charles Turner. And so I told the story on Charles Turner. But, I don't want to be, I'll be honest, I came across Charles Turner as a graduate student, and I didn't know he was Black. And somebody I was at the University of Illinois, and a person who was on my committee, at that time I was working on my master's, he said, do you know Charles Turner was Black? And I was embarrassed because, I had an afro, I was, with the Black, I was chair of the, I was the, the president of the Black Psychological Association. And I didn't know that. Also, I was instrumental on having the Charles Turner Award.
Well, congratulations on that. That's terrific. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I've been caught up with administrative things, so I haven't been as active with animal behavior. I'm still a member, but not as active with them. But I'm glad to hear you all say that. And when I listen, I'm in a world that's very different. At Morehouse College, it's a historically Black institution, and that's where I got my undergraduate degree. And you know, the thing about Martin Luther King, he's a graduate of Morehouse College, and he convinced me to come to Morehouse. My father knew him. My father's a minister, and they were friends. I mean, the thought of having school classes on Martin Luther King's birthday was just, you know, that's just alien to me, but I know it happens. So
Today's his birthday, actually.
yeah, it is. It is.
One of my colleagues called out the authors of a prominent animal behavior textbook for not crediting Turner with, for example, developing learning curves and several of his other contributions. And it's actually been changed in the most recent edition of that textbook. Now, it wasn't fully expanded on, but they made some changes. And so, you know, small steps, but making progress.
Charles Turner's required reading in my learning and memory class, and also my animal behavior class. I have articles that the students have to read.
So Brian, I think you've had your hand up for a while.
Sure. So this is sort of interwoven. I'm an animal welfare scientist predominantly, and I study behavior as the primary outcome. And one of the things about animal welfare scientists is that we have to have a really strong understanding of ethics and how animal use ethics feeds into everything. And so I've been trying to implement some information about the history of ethics and talk about the origins of our ethical theories are predominantly from 1800s. What do they call that? The modern era, from predominantly white men. And so for my classes, we developed a series of diversity in assignments, and I have the students go and look at different perspectives on animal use theory from different indigenous peoples, from different historical figures, from women, looking at some of the contemporary trends in animal studies that are being pushed forward by African American scholars and LGBTQ plus scholars. So that's pretty interesting and fun. But in the process of doing this, we've had the development of some controversy and conflict at our university about the value of qualitative and quantitative research data. So in one of the methodologies that I use is qualitative behavioral assessment, where you look at animals and then you provide a list of descriptions of what those animals are experiencing. And I collaborated with a diversity group on campus where we also looked at student perceptions on inclusivity and diversity using qualitative research. And it's created a really interesting conversation and divide within my department and other departments about what makes for quality data. It's helped me understand that I think that as scientists, we need to be a little bit more flexible towards the different forms of data and how we use and interpret data. Anyways, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this. Just a lot of thoughts running through my head about some of the the conflicts that are coming up that I'm trying to bring into the classroom and to discuss in the classroom, but I don't quite know how to do. So the thoughts that you all presented on integrating things like about Conrad Lorenz and Charles Henry Turner, those are good things that I can pull into this conversation. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we've definitely brought up some really important perspectives that maybe 10 years ago wouldn't have been brought up at all. So I really appreciate hearing all these different perspectives on really what is animal behavior and who studies it. Nancy, you've had your hand up for a while. I don't know if it was from previously.
Are you talking to me, Nancy Solomon?
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry, I'm like looking at you. Obviously don't know I'm looking at you.
No, I don't mean to have my hand up anymore.
Okay. All right. Christine, you have your hand up.
Sure. I was just thinking about, since we've been talking about better representation in the sciences, it's reminding me of a couple of things. Most of my experiences with birds, and there's one funny example. It's kind of funny and it's also kind of not, specifically about indigenous knowledge of species. And there was this example that got a lot of press of some birds in Australia that set wildfires and spread wildfire on purpose. And this is his fascinating behavior, and it was quote unquote discovered recently, when in fact the native people have known about it for thousands of years. And that's how it was discovered, I think, is some scientist having a conversation with the people that lived there. So just wanted to spotlight that there's a lot of, there's both history of people who aren't getting attention in the field, and then there's people who are ignored by academia a lot of the time, and that there's slowly being more attention paid to that from what I've seen. I don't know how many journals there are or how well organized it is, but I know that there's discussion of like ethnobiology as like a field trying to start to actually look at that knowledge and record it so that the academic researchers are thinking about that information. And then also, just like somebody in the chat asked, I'll put a link in here somewhere. If you're looking for how to represent current researchers that are of more diverse backgrounds, Twitter is a really great way to do this. For example, the American Society of Mammalogists had a Black Mammalogists Week on Twitter, where they had people highlight their research. So you can find people who are active right now through events like that online.
So hearing lots of different unique perspectives. This is awesome. Carrie?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it in maybe our last, I don't remember which one. I don't know. Anyway, I was thinking just as a resource, I did in one of the breakout sessions, because I show students a video that's an interview with a scientist, the Gene Robinson video on honeybee transitioning from nurser to forager. But the idea here was to potentially, I think maybe this has come up, but get short videos from all of us as representing animal behaviorists now, and you know, you could have one or two things that you want us to address, you know, how we became interested, if you want us to touch on our background, why we were in this field, and just again what we do, just to show kind of the faces of animal behavior now to our students. And then this would be a resource we could pull from and have our students listen to, again, short videos of us talking about what we do and why.
That's a great idea. Sue, who's the head of the education?
It's Heather Zimbler DiLorenzo.
Maybe we could have her start to organize a series of questions, like a template, and then people can Zoom their 3-minute answer to the template of questions, and then they could be pulled together as short videos.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And so I raised my hand because one of the things that I sort of have been doing, taking advantage of the fact that we're online, is reaching out to colleagues who are not local as guest speakers, but not necessarily doing it live. You know, I'll find a time at their convenience, and I do basically an interview with them and then make that available to my class. And I think that's a great way to kind of introduce students to the diversity of people, of disciplines. You know, I've done it in my conservation bio class. I'll be doing it in my zoo animal management class. And it would be great to have short videos like that, the education committee perhaps can spearhead this, pull together short videos by ABS members about their careers, about their research, that can be sort of infused into classes.
Right.
And I think that can be really useful.
There's a consortium of junior colleges that have created the World Classroom on Science and Society. And I know I've spoken to them and with a lot of student questions. It's been very, very interesting and very good.
So the Education Resources Subcommittee, we've been talking quite a bit about, and even talking with the Diversity Subcommittee about how can we actually get these kind of resources out there. And so there is a project which I don't recall the exact details on, maybe Laura can speak a little bit more about it, but on trying to get like a class project in which students are going through and interviewing a particular scientist that they might find on Twitter, and putting together some sort of nice summary of the research that they do and a little bit of background how they got to where they're at. So we'll see what ends up happening with that, but I don't know, Laura, if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Sorry, my dog's barking in the background, but yeah, so this is one that Esteban had proposed to the Education Committee, and Anne Clark, and I think Anandita were working on. And I think what they're looking for now is some help with it. So it's not, my understanding is it's an idea, but it's not in the making yet. And so if there's anyone here who's maybe motivated to help get involved in developing the assignment itself, that's what we're looking for help right now. I don't think anyone's taken on
really, to make it compelling, the editing's really hard. It's gonna, you need a professional to really take all the noise that we create and find the gems in our many sentences to put together into a short 2-minute, 3-minute video.
I wonder if we could farm that out to students as well that aren't necessarily in the sciences at our institution that can make a cross-disciplinary thing. Because some very talented students that might be.
Yeah, we have some students who are double majoring in digital media arts. So this would be a perfect task for them.
Yeah, could be an honors thesis or something where they get, because it's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, but at least trying to get something out there. So that's the first step of, okay, well, let's put together some sort of assignment that students can do so that we have something out there. And then if we develop it more later on, great. But if we can at least start, that's kind of the goal of this. I mean, there's great long-term goals as well, but we got to start somewhere with it. So, and the idea is to make it into a class project, and then the students can decide if they want their individual like snapshots or whatever, if they want them publicly available or not.
So I'm going to ask Nancy a question as editor-in-chief. Would Animal Behavior for its electronic edition be able to put 1 or 2 of these in each edition?
Possibly. I was funny you should ask in a way, because I was thinking it might be more possible to do a special edition than to try to spread them across different issues, because of the in the instructions there's certain formats of certain articles that we tend to publish, but if it was different than what Zulema did, with the